Hello everyone, and welcome to my ranking of every single boss in all of Dark Souls 3 and all of Bloodborne. This comes together to be a total of 62 bosses for both games. And the way that I rank these bosses is a 1 through 10, but on a tier type scale, tier 1, tier 2, etc., with some bosses in between. So, without any further, let's get started with the list. The absolute worst. And the easiest boss of both games is the Man-Eater board. I didn't have any video, so I had to hop on and kill him really fast. Next up is the Celestial Emissary. You might get hurt during this fight, but you most definitely will not suffer a death during this fight. Tier 1 is just a couple mob enemies and easy bosses. As long as you stay close to Ludwig's Gunter, this boss fight will be very easy and you'll be wondering why they decided to make it the first one. If you are not good at parrying, all you need to do is practice on this boss a couple times and the whole game will become easier. Number 58 is Mirko's Wet Nurse. For being technically the last boss in the vanilla game, it's odd that it also happens to be one of the easiest. 57. Ancient Wyvern is an easy boss, as the only way you can mess up is if you miss the timing on your plunge attack, and if that happens, just run up and do it again. 56 is the Witch of Hemwick. As long as you know to dodge the wraiths and go for the witch, you'll be alright. Easy fight. The One Reborn has just one obstacle that causes a problem, but its easy solution to that obstacle gives it a spot down low on the list. Tier 2 are just monsters that would give new players a hard time. The Deacons of the Deep is a fight that you can go into without resting at a bonfire. And the last of the top 10 easiest bosses is Mikolash, Host of the Nightmare. Very annoying to try and chase him around, but is a very weak boss as long as you dodge left or right to his arcane. Loran Silverbeast is an extraordinarily easy boss considering it's in the lower Loran dungeon. Osiris appears to be too consumed in himself to put up a good fight. It's too bad. The only negative side of the brain sucker is it sucks the inside out of you. I would say that the mob enemy is a lot harder than the boss. The bracelets on his wrist just make High Lord Wolnir too weak of a boss and not enough of a challenge. I once considered Cleric Beast to be a hard boss before I played Bloodborne or any other Souls game, as it was the first I encountered. The weaker end of the standard From Software boss. Fort of the Boreal Valley is a hit or miss boss, depending, I think, on what type of build you are, but I've struggled before. The Cursed Rod of Grapefruit is actually pretty hard for how early in the game you encounter it, but it's still pretty easily, especially if you wait a while in the game before you decide to fight it. Now, the Moon Presence, for being the last boss in Bloodborne, and having an attack that gets you to 1 HP, is far too easy of a boss and is all the way at 3.1. Vicar Amelia may be fast and may be able to heal herself, but I think there's 43 other bosses that are harder than she is. So long as you hide behind the sunflower in the middle of the battlefield, the Living Failure should be an easy fight, the easiest of the old hunters. I wasn't sure who to attack during this fight, and I was rather surprised when it was over. I think this fight had more to do with lore than it did with being hard. Many people believe that Father Gascoigne is one of the hardest bosses in Bloodborne, but once you complete the game and go back to fight him again, you'll find that he's too aggressive for his own good and is actually an easy fight. So long as you kill all the clones before you attack the main Crystal Sage, it'll be an easy fight, but if you neglect to do that, this fight can get quite challenging pretty quick. I've decided to add the story mode of Amygdala since it is so different from the dungeon mode, but it seems to be a pretty easy fight the first time you encounter her. Yorm the Giant ended up being a disappointing fight with the Storm Ruler. The bloodletting beast comes off as an intimidating boss, but it isn't much harder than Yorm the Giant as long as you stay under it and stay aggressive. These are pretty much your standard Soulsborne bosses. The Forgotten Madman and his escort is one of my favorite fights. I just wish that they would have made it a little more challenging. It might have a raining arrow attack, but I don't think Aldrich deserves a spot any higher on the list than this right here. The Beast Possessed Soul hits really hard and really fast, making it quite, the challenge. The Bloodstarved Beast, as long as you dodge to the left, the whole fight you will hardly take any hit, and you might be able to beat him without even getting poisoned like I did here. Ram the Spider story mode is actually harder than in the Chalice dungeon mode, because in the story mode you don't have any pillars to hide behind. And at the bottom of the halfway point we have the very first Chalice dungeon boss, the Undead Giant, who I was very underleveled to face off after the Bloodstarved Beast. These are your standard run-of-the-mill From Software bosses. The fact that the Undead Giant of Lower Thumerian's chains can swing and one-shot you any point makes it a pretty challenging boss. The Soul of Cinder is just your standard endgame boss. It actually is pretty easy for an endgame boss. Irbitra's Daughter of the Cosmos is a pretty hard boss, and you gotta watch out for his lasers because those will one-shot you. Martyr Lorgarius has some spells that he shoots if you stand far away. The key is to get close. Abyss Watchers is a really great fight. I enjoyed that fight a lot. I just wish maybe it was more of 2-on-1 during that fight. The Shadow of Yharnam is a very hard boss, considering how early in the game it is. Dragon Slayer Armor is a hard boss in a sense that his attacks are very strong and it only takes a few of them to kill you. And the Relentless Pontiff Sullivan is at 5.9, the 23rd hardest boss, because he will not let up on his attacks and he can be a real challenge. These bosses aren't the worst, but they can definitely give you a hard time. Champion Gunder hits hard and has very well telegraphed moves. It is hard to swing on him more than once, and it's hard to fight him and heal on him. Keeper of the Old Lords, being in the Defiled dungeon, your half is cut in half, and there is very many opportunities for a one-shot. The Dancer of the Vril Valley, I can't explain why it's really hard, I just somewhat managed to have a hard time with it. Gurman, the First Hunter, is a very fast boss and can drain your health really fast if you're not paying attention. Thumerian Elder can also drain your health really fast without paying attention and can put a nice combo attack on ya. Old Demon King, I either beat in my first try or it takes me way too many tries to kill him. More often, I think it depends on the build. The first time I faced Ludwig made me rank it this high because it took me many tries to kill him my first time. The Loran Dark Beast has an obnoxious AoE attack which is almost impossible to avoid and is hard because it's so low within the Loran Chalice. These bosses are hard and they will give you a hard time. The Thumerian Queen. She's a pretty hard boss, the last boss of the Chalice dungeon bosses. If you don't watch out, she can trap you. She usually won't pull a combo on you, but if she does, it's certain death, and she has hard hitting. I used to think that the Apparent Beast was the hardest boss in the whole game, but if you stay steady, dodge into the left, and don't try to poison it to death, just try to fight it, it's a doable fight. At number 12, the harder version of the Bloodletting Beast. This one is headless. I don't think he has any more moves, but he is a lot more aggressive, has a lot more HP, and will make you put up more of a fight. The Twin Princess gave me a really hard time with strength and slow weapon. The teleporting is out of this world. There's a lot of teleporting, and the second phase I think is easier than the first one. Starting off the top 10 is the Watchdog of the Old Lords. If you've ever fought this boss, you certainly know why it's here. With a million AoE attacks, and all it takes to kill you is a single charge. Another fire boss coming in at number 9 is the Demon Prince. The two phases are equally hard, and the toxic swamp in the middle of the place doesn't make it very easier. The 8th hardest boss from DS3, I don't have video for it, so I'll let you get. The 7th hardest boss is the Nameless King. This is because you first have to kill his dragon that he rides on, and he has very random, smooth, delayed attacks that do a lot of damage. The last 5 bosses, I guess you could call top tier bosses. Orphan of Kos is just too fast of a boss. I would say jump behind him though when he goes up into the air, and that will make a fight a lot more easy, and I was never able to avoid the death animation. Lawrence the First Vicar, I think, is the final boss in Bloodborne, and this boss kicked my butt a lot of times, but I guess if you stay with it and you keep running that difficult run to that boss, you'll have him down eventually. Slave Knight Gale is a hard boss because he's very relentless in his first phase, although he is easy to stun. But I'd say what makes the hardest part about him is in his third phase. He has so many attacks and so many AoEs and spins coming at you that it's really hard to see what. And the hardest boss in all of Dark Souls 3 goes to Sister Fried, with the invisible tricks, the exploding AoE ice, the father, the breathing fire, the dark flames, the relentlessness, the 3 phases. It's a very hard boss fight, and I thought it was actually a very fun one too. And the very hardest boss in all of Dark Souls 3 and all of Bloodborne is the one and only Defiled Amygdala. I added a story mode because this mode of Amygdala is just on a whole nother level with half health. It's not even like Sister Fried with ice and AoE and 3 phases. This is just simply arm and arm and arm and arm and arm, and I think 2 more arms that all do one-shots. It's almost comical how hard the fight is, but you can just stay in front of it and you'll eventually beat it. Well, that wraps up all 62 bosses in Dark Souls 3 and Bloodborne. Maybe I was able to gain some insight as to which game has some harder bosses or not. This list contained 38 bosses from Bloodborne and 24 bosses from Dark Souls 3, so take a grain with some of that. So obviously there's going to be some more hard bosses that are from Bloodborne, but there's also going to be some easier ones as well. But as far as an even amount of each within each tier, it was pretty well rounded, and I have no complaints, and they are 2 great games. Thank you for watching.